Hello everyone. Hopefully everyone can hear me pretty well. I am trying something out with the microphone, but hopefully everyone can hear me. So let's get started with this lecture on traditional architecture of China and Japan. And so hopefully everyone has already read the chapter, or you're about to already working on the assignment, and hopefully this lecture can help you out. So first of all, I wanted to tell you how China and Japan, if we go through the timeline of what we've been looking at, going from the Paleolithic to the Mesolithic, going to the Neolithic, eventually going into the Sumerians with the through the Minoans and the Mycenaeans, eventually getting into the new classical Greek architecture. I did jump, and through that you saw the Egyptians, and so all these things, they're sort of, the beginnings of architecture. So, and now we go to, we've been focusing on the Western world, and so now we go more into Asia. So let's start seeing what is happening around the same times, but in China and Japan. So this is the Great Wall of China, and I don't know if it's one of those famous things that it became a UNESCO heritage site, so now it's being protected and being taken care of. But has been a lot of tear down, because it's been constructed for many years. And what I like about it is that, again, we always have to ask ourselves the means, the motive, and the ability. Throughout this class, hopefully you start seeing these patterns, and architecture starts really becoming alive, in the sense of you start understanding there's clear patterns. So what is the means, what is the motive, what is the ability? So what is the motive? So, and it's very clear that it's not aesthetic, it's not really to create some sort of perception to make it look nice or beauty. It's based upon protection. It's based upon the idea of war happening time after time, and needed a sense of protection. So you can see that very clearly, and the design reflects it. So what's the motive? We understand the motive. Then what's the mean and the ability? The means is what's the material, and the ability is how do they use the materials to be able to construct it, which, again, throughout the book you'll start answering those questions time after time. So I highlighted a couple of things in the book, and those are the things I'm going to stop on. So if you see me scrolling down through the book, this is your book, chapter 4. If you see me scrolling down and just jumping over things, it doesn't mean it's not important. It just means I'm sort of jumping over in sense of time, because I don't want to make this lecture too long. We do hopefully make it pretty short. But the things that are highlighted are the things that I want to focus on. In China, it says here that, again, you need to understand the context, you need to understand what's happening in those times. But most of the building came from the government. The government was really addressing and pushing for the construction of most of these buildings, and from religious to private patrons. And this is very important to know: who's funding, where's everything coming from, because you start seeing the design. Eventually, when we get to Italy, you start seeing rich families such as the Medici and other families being the patrons. So who's sponsoring this is also an important question to answer. And we can see in this government-led sort of protection, trying to seek to create things in the Great Wall of China, which was constructed by one of the emperors in 221 BCE, for the Common Era, and has been constantly being rebuilt. So the Great Wall of China that we see nowadays that's not how it was originally created. It was created in certain parts, and eventually there was an emperor that sort of united them all. So it was done in phases in a way, and it was done in also not as one continuous thing until eventually an emperor combined them all. One of the things they say about the Great Wall of China is that you can see it from outer space. It's one of the only buildings you can see from outer space, but we know that that is not true. It's just something. It is true to a certain point, but it's not the only one that can be seen. But I'd say that from the moon you can't really see it either way. So. But it's a great strategy to promote the Great Wall of China. And it's an astonishing piece of construction with around 4,000 miles long and in this desert type environment. And originally the way it was constructed was, as it said here, with rammed earth. So the way, there's a video there on your lectures, and it shows this method of constructing it. So hopefully you can go see that video. But it's basically the way it's being explained, rammed earth, just getting earth, getting dirt, and just like smashing it, hitting it until it becomes hard, becomes compacted. This sort of idea of compression, compressing something, which is still used nowadays to another extent, to another level. But the idea of compression is still kind of, it's seen nowadays, even for construction. When you construct a house, there's a lot of doing with compressed earth, but these engineers and as they were designing this, they were able to use the materials that were near them and started creating this. Eventually, they did add stronger material through brick and stone. So that's mainly what we see. The dirt has sort of faded away. But it is part of it's important to know the history. And the height, it varies from 39 feet with an average of 16 feet. So it was a bit tall, and again, there's some videos showing you a bit more of what these architecture wall. And so that's an introduction. But now let's start talking about the idea behind it. What is the means? When we talked about the means, is what's the idea behind it? What is guiding the construction in this period? And one of the things that is guiding them is this idea, this belief, this philosophical beliefs, this Chinese philosophy by two great writers, philosophers called Lao Tzu and Confucius. Also combine the yin and yang, which is this kind of opposites, this black, white, this sort of this idea of unity combined by this sort of opposite. So it's really interesting what they start doing through this philosophy. And the Taoism was its mythical approach seeking the harmony of human action in the world through the study of nature. And it's this philosophy, and it's understanding this, connecting the world to nature, connecting the world to the real world, and you can see this very applied a lot in art and design. And so they care a lot about the views and the experiences and everything that is sort of happening. Confucius, which is also a great philosopher. So we got Taoism saying connecting this, the world has to connect to the nature, connect to the world, connecting to the reality. And then we have Confucius, who talks about more hierarchy, talks about more the order, talks about more the ability of how things are moved. There's a certain pattern, there's a certain hierarchical order of the families, and you can start seeing both of these philosophies in the architecture. And then they start also with so this is the sort of the philosophies, but Buddhism was also greatly spread in China, and so the religious belief of as they follow Buddha, they start creating all these temples. They start building all these temples, and then if you start really understanding and the story of Buddha and the religion and their beliefs, you start seeing a lot of patterns eventually found in their designs, a lot of their designs. So the Buddhism has to do a lot with enlightenment. If you don't know what enlightenment is this sort of stage where you that you're able to get to, and I'm oversimplifying this, but just so that you can get an idea. But it's reaching enlightenment, which is just reaching wisdom, being able to somehow flow out of your body to get to this level of floating and seeing everything. So there's this constant pursuit of knowledge, this constant pursuit of virtue, this constant pursuit of elevating the body to a new level, and mentally and spiritually. So it's this journey of enlightenment that is very interesting. So then, so now that we understand, so the Buddha founded Buddhism and many followers, and then so the religion started, and so they started creating these temples. They started this temples, and one of these sort of temples is the pagoda. And the pagoda, I want you to really understand this, because there's certain things that are very easy to be familiar when you know that you can, whenever you go to Japan, or if you do talk to people about Japanese architecture, you're able to really know now more about this. And one of those easy ways that you can talk about is pagodas. And pagodas are simply multi-story buildings with layered roofs that are erected to hold the relics of Buddha's presence. So there, some of these, if you Google or start looking into this, some of these pagodas, they start holding relics, such as one of the most important and famous are holding one of the tooth of Buddha. Others are some sort of bone and some sort of something that connects it. And so that becomes having that relic, having that something that belonged to the Buddha, makes this building extremely important and extremely religious, extremely sacred for the people that follow Buddha. So you can start seeing why they wanted to build so up, why they wanted to build so high, and why they wanted to despite it's sort of a monument / architecture, because it's most of it is not being used, despite it's so tall. Most of it's just being used in the bottom part, but in a way I wanted people from afar to see this. And not only that, but enlightenment has everything to do with elevating yourself. So you start seeing how they wanted to go up, and hopefully you did read the previous chapter when we talked about India stupas, and you can connect those with these with this one. So then the pagoda, again, different sort of pagodas. Something that I do want you to understand is this orthogonal way of seeing. So Chinese architecture has this orthogonal, and this top part is the finial, which an easy way to remember, it's those of you who know Spanish, fin, which means end. So it has this finial, which is this top part that we will see in other types of architecture, sort of top tower thing, just showing that thing. And I'll talk about more about the different parts of the architecture of this. And this one, you can start seeing how it starts this sort of chatra or stylish Bodhi tree. That was really interesting. Sorry, I guess I clicked on that. It started reading, but it's this Bodhi tree, and one of the things that it's interesting is I have an image here. This is sort of a depiction of what they have of the Bodhi tree, and the Bodhi tree, it's this olive tree, and what's believed is that what's believed is that Buddha, when he was meditating for the first time, when he reached enlightenment for the first time, he was meditating under this tree. So so again, it's connecting, trying to connect this to this idea of enlightenment, this idea of wisdom. So now let's go into the some sort of principles, some sort of ideas. Wood was primarily the most important material the Chinese architecture did, and they use a lot of post and beam. Again, we saw that in the first, which is again, what is the ability? How are they going to do it? And they're using this post and beam, which is very similar to columns and beams, which we have been seeing with the Greek, which even goes back to post and beam to what the Stonehenge design was. If you remember those big megalith stones that were just sort of standing on the ground, freestanding, but they were had this post and beam. So again, we start seeing the same pattern when we come through architecture. And something that I want you to know between Japanese and Chinese, that they're both very modular. And when I say modular, I'm talking about that they follow this sort of pattern, this sort of idea that is a modular unit called the Jian. So it's sort of this square that where they're placed, it has these columns around it. It has these four columns with basic measurement. And interior freedom, the lightweight, non-boring walls can be located in response to the internal lead. So this sort of geons which are sort of the same shape. They start creating these courtyards, just creating the spaces. And here's another picture of some sort of plans of a typical Chinese house, which is Chinese used to create a larger spaces. So here in the red, we start seeing how the geons were placed here. And that, in a sense, has created these other spaces. Same here, same way here, same way here. Is creating this sort of spaces. I think I had another picture. Yeah, so this is I think a similar image to one we just saw, and it's just a specific module that is the basic shape to traditional Chinese architecture. Module consists of a rectangular area with structural frame, and this module can be repeated to create large spaces. Usually these spaces are in odd numbers. Amount of modules to allow central gathering area that is common to many buildings in China. So here we start seeing the Jian. So you just start thinking China, Japan, very, very modular. So most of these houses, they were unless they were really, really, really poor communities, but most of these houses had courtyards linked through some sort of corridor, and they rely a lot on axial arrangements, formula keys, sequencing to establish dominance. So again, we start thinking about what a, hopefully there's a plan. I don't think there's a plan right here. But we start thinking of what Confucius said. Confucius said about the idea that there's a sort of hierarchy, there's some sort of connection, that something has to be connected. So I think there's an image. Okay, here you are. So in a typical home, here you see a perspective drawing, and you start seeing here's the entrance, and the entrances go, and then there's these houses, and there's this house. I think there was a better picture, yeah. So so here you see the entrance, and you see all these different houses. And what you need to understand is that the courtyard, again, some houses had 1, 2, 3, 4, had more courtyards depending on how many families. Some even had like 40 people living in one of these houses. So if they had more family or more money to afford it, they could. But usually what happened was that in the front of the houses, the first layers, the first steps, they were the youngest kids. They were the youngest in the generation. So and then as they went older, it was the parents, and eventually the grandfather, which is the most respected in the house. A lot of them also had this division for the service of the man and the woman. So in the back, usually in the back, despite it's the highest, they did have some sort of service. So it's for the people cooking and cleaning, that they lived there, or sometimes they also had it here in the front. So something that is that again very interesting about them, which I'm not sure if it's going to be seen later on, but we're talking about here is sequencing to establish dominance. Let me see if it's going to be addressed a little bit here. I'm not sure, because I know I wanted to mention it, but it wasn't. Okay, yeah. Okay, so I guess I am jumping, getting a little bit too ahead of myself. Okay, so it talks about it a bit further on, which I was share, but I wasn't to share. Okay, so just remember that. I already kind of mentioned it, so when we get to that part, you already know. So here's just talking about, I guess the idea, the wood and the different materials that it has. It has columns, brackets, set. So it follows this 4-piece. So you need to understand this 4-piece, which is a platform. Again, elevating the thing, elevating the status, followed by a column to create this. Most of it is being held by this. And following this bracket set. This bracket set is important because they don't use everything. All the joineries are not based on nails. They're based on brackets. So it's sort of, there's a lot of videos showing you this. I think there's links to that provided as well. The brackets is sort of this Lego where, or more of a puzzle like, where there's openings and things just start following into one another. And then you finally have your roof. So this is a very common representation of what a temple looks like. So again, if you want to start understanding the basic, simple things, this is this is what they started to follow. And again, the finial that we mentioned earlier, that sort of goes to the top. So this is some images of brackets that I've mentioned right now, and the brackets, they're composed of different parts. The one of the beginnings is called a do, and probably not pronouncing it right, but the do, and then there's this do gong long, and so this is the again it's the part plus this leads to that. And it goes like this, and then this sort of place here, and then this here. And so you start seeing how it's sort of a puzzle that you can start building to get the thing. And so this is you can see the do, the gong, you see the, all these, and there's a lot more parts that we're not discussing, but I just want you to know that that's sort of how it looks. They all puzzle-like, they start overlapping one over another without the need of nails. And what's so amazing is that this construction has amazed engineers and architects even from our time, because they've survived so many earthquakes. They've survived. The thing that mostly destroys these buildings is wood, as you all know, is weather, water, even some sort of bugs can affect it, and so things like that really affected fire being one of them as well. But when it comes to Japan has had one of the biggest, Japan and China has had one of the biggest earthquakes, and still this construction has proven to be able to withstand earthquakes, which is really incredible. So you start seeing this bracket system that they start showing you. And okay, so then we keep going. Another thing is Feng Shui. I want to talk a little bit of Feng Shui, which is here is described as the art of adjusting the building to particular features of the individual site in its microclimate. But it's about the human action should be in accord with the cosmos. It's understanding that there's some sort of order to the world. There's some sort of forward to things where there has to be this sort of balance of water and fire, with earth and wind, where there's all of these things talking to each other, and there has to be this some sort of balance. The literal world, Feng means wind, and Shui means water. So I remember Shui, and I was learning Chinese for a while, and Shui, there's like two ways to say it, and one means water and another one means completely different. And I remember going to a restaurant trying to practice my Chinese, and I was learning Mandarin, so practicing my Mandarin, and I remember saying shui, and people not understanding me at all. So I did not practice too much, so I did not do well too much in that class. But it's interesting as this, and when it talks about, you know, this idea of these elements, and even now in architecture, in modern architecture, Feng Shui has been one of those things that have really recurred now a lot, about how we're going to place things, how we're really going to, what direction are we placing, or are we going to see if you have something heavy, you need something light, and if you need, so if you want to watch some Feng Shui videos, it's going to be really, it's going to help you a lot to really understand, you know, what modern architects are doing, such as Zen Pei, which he passed away, but he did a lot in his architecture. So I'm jumping over that a little bit. Again, I want you to understand something that's very, very, very important is the central axis when it comes to Japanese architecture. Everything, Japanese and Chinese, a lot has to do with, you know, this sort of axis, this sort of where is it guiding you? Where is this? It's a lot has to do with a sense of a journey, a sense that you're walking through something, and they're creating this big path. So despite you see a lot of different buildings of different sizes, there's this one clear axis that they're basing everything upon, and really working on this symmetry. You see this amazing symmetry all along the building. So I think that's another thing that's really, really amazing. And you start seeing that very, very, very evident in the city planning. We talked about Daoism and Confucianism, and the Confucianism, again, it goes back with the idea of hierarchy, the idea of you know, going from least important to most important, going from more private to more public to more private. So what are the areas that everyone can access, and what are the areas that no one can answer because it's a holy place? And you start seeing the way they created this. So the way they worked is that they would have 3 gates, and these 3 gates created from these lines started creating the grid, and the grid started creating the city itself. And here we have the same plan, but in a more descriptive way, and you start seeing, you know, the 3 gates. 3 gates on each side, 3 gates, 3 gates. Here you have other gates as you enter more of a private place, but you start seeing how it starts going from more public to more private. So as it starts going, you start seeing how it starts getting a bit more the hierarchy of their temple. So here's more of a market, but once you get to this place, this is probably a place that not many can enter, and so on and so forth. So you start seeing that the design of the city planning, and so yeah, so you start seeing here imperial residence is here, administrative center is here, but you seeing the markets and here, and so you see how these gates are really creating this pattern, this grid for the whole city, which is really, really amazing. And you can see this central axis just guiding to it. And the same thing here. Again, you can see this the gate is opening, is entering, and you get the central axis again all over it. And I really like how you can just place my cursor here and just sort of scroll down, and it goes straight into this this axis. You can see it's very, very, very clear how you can see it, and not only that, but the symmetry. And again, you start seeing, so this is site plan, plan of the building, and you start seeing, you know, how it's more, the hierarchy goes from outer to inner, and so it goes from more public to more private, even literally calling it forbidden. Forbidden meaning no one can enter there. So you start seeing the idea of Confucius and the idea of Taoism, where they're connecting everything to nature. Another plan of the imperial city, a bit more things to know, the axes. You start seeing, you know, a bit more into detail what's going on. This is an image of the Hall of the Supreme Harmony, which is an amazing architecture. One of the top, again, I've said that a lot, but I guess I'm excited about all the architecture. But this is definitely one that I'm excited to see eventually. Hopefully I can see that one soon. So again, talking a little bit about the axis, but one of the things that I want you to read is this whole axial approach was consciously designed to provide a suitable, impressive setting for emperors who consider themselves the mightiest world on earth. So this axis was pointing to where the emperor was, but at no point can they see the entire road or the final destination. The axis unfolds instead as a stage series of spaces progressing logically from one to the next. So this idea of unfolding, of you know, of this sort of mystery was something that was also very very important to them. So now we start getting into the houses. Again, you start to see this central axis. You see this central axis creating the symmetry. So if we really cut this in half and deleted this and mirror this to the other side, you can see how they're basically the same thing. But one of the things that's interesting to show is that this entrance is not a this is not in a in the main entrance. This is not in its axis is not centered. So it's important to see how what to call this. Important to see how they changed this axis. Sorry, they changed this axis because what Confucius really said, as you can start seeing, is the guest of children, the children, and then the children's suite, and then as it keeps on going and becomes the father, the mother, the grandfather, it starts going into this stages. Is that they didn't want anyone to see anything. They didn't want anything to see anything. And here we have the surface right here, because again, more of a service, and if you're going from hierarchy, that would consider to be, you know, less on the status. But they, by putting these entrance to the side, by the entrance becoming symmetrical, it allowed that no one could see the actual house. It allowed that no one can see too much of the inside of the house, and it created this family privacy in a way. What many people call this was sort of this carriage gate. So the way it was like when people were dropped off through their carriage, they were kind of being dropped off here in a way that was very subtle, and no one can really see anything happening. So everything was working with the idea of privacy and working with this. Something that is interesting, I want to bring it to my own, bring it to modern times, is that in a way I was influenced by them, by their design. And this is a design that I did of a house. This is not the final one. I was looking for the final, but I couldn't get it. Probably do have it, but it's very, very similar. A couple of changes, but this was a plan that I did. And basically, I based it upon that idea. I based it upon the same idea of, and probably you think weird, It's a little weird. It is a little weird, but I based it upon the same idea of hierarchy or the sort of stages of privacy. So the same way that what I did is this idea, this is a foyer. So people that come into the house, so if you get delivered a package or someone comes soliciting saying, would you like to buy some ice cream or cookies or something, you open the door. This is this is inside of the house. And as they come in, these some sort of, that's what I'm saying, things change because now there's no door. Now it's more, there's a wall and then there's an opening here. So the door is more over here. So once someone opens, the only thing they can see is whatever people place here, either a table, a painting, or whatever. But no one, if you're a guest or you're a stranger to the family, you will only see the foyer. You will not get enough information. You will not know how big the house is, what's going on, how many bedrooms. All you will see is foyer. And once you get access to the second stage, I decided that this is a living room. And so the living room is okay. I'm a bit friendly with you. I'm nice with you. I know you enough to bring you into my living room. And you can see the rooms, you can see things. But even though this is sort of placed and created in a way that you don't really know what these rooms are because you are in this sort of stage. So then I designed this wall. You could put your TV here or something, but it creates also this protection for the next stage, which is the kitchen. Here's your dining table and your kitchen area. But again, if you're stranger, you only hear. You're sort of a friend. You get to come here, maybe have a talk with the people. But if you're like really close to the family, you get to go to the next stage, and you come to this dining area, and which is one of the most personal things that we can do is have a meal with someone. So the final stage, if you could call it that, is this dining area. And again, if you're here, you can't really even see where the kitchen is. You don't know anything from this side. As you go through this sort of hallway or this sort of arch hallway, you get to be more personal. And the final is the outside here. There's a patio area that, again, it's not in the design, but there's this patio area that it's even more public, or even more private. This is, maybe you can come and eat, but if you really can just come outside to this very private place, have a barbecue or something, that means that you're really close to the family. So sort of based it upon, so I wanted to show you something that, this is current. This house is built currently in the RGV. It's in the RGV, and it combines with this idea of Confucianism and with the Chinese architecture, whereas this sort of stages and how in order to connect from one to another, there was a sort of hallways, a sort of path that they would connect to another. And none of these buildings were all connected. They were individually. So there was, in order to get to another, you went through different stages, this hierarchical level. So again, in this way, if they brought mail, you only saw this. You were friends, you probably got here. Pretty close, you got here, and so on and so forth. And so that's sort of some interesting of the hierarchy and the dominance gave way to all the temples, to all the different ways of design. I'm jumping over some stuff. This is a house that's really interesting, but I'll jump over them. You can read those on your own. Now we start getting into Japanese architecture, and fire. Again, they use wood, so wood really through fire and natural erosion has really there's not a lot of left of the original, but we do understand what they did. They use also post and lintel, same as Chinese, and they use bracketed, same as the Chinese architecture. So we start seeing a lot of that pattern, but the big difference is they do marry a bit more with the asymmetry rather than the symmetrical that we've been used to in the Chinese. They also get their own idea of their own representation of the pagoda. We saw the octagonal with the Chinese, but then we start seeing a very square one with and here very square ones with the Japanese. And again, similar, holding the relics, building very high. As for Buddha, there's a base, there's a sort of platform, then you have your beams, your columns, and you're just seeing your bracketed, and you start seeing your roof, and you see this finial on the top. So, and this ornamentation, there was different ways, and there's another. They also have these idea of gates, are very important. You start seeing these again. The lotus flower that we talked about earlier, where Buddha was doing his meditation and led him to reach enlightenment, reach some meaning, wisdom. So those are things that are very, very similar to the Chinese, but this is where we start differentiating a little bit. And these are the Shinto shrines. The Shinto shrines are an amazing piece of architecture, are amazing. And so they're typically small in scale and very, very, very modest. So this is where we start seeing Japanese architecture really take its own place, to really, really stand out and really differentiate the most. That's why I kind of jumped a little bit over the other architecture, because this is when the Shinto shrine really starts showing what Japanese architecture is. And so they start talking about very similar concepts about connecting to the sun and the earth. But one of the things is that they also very symmetrical. This is a very simplistic but very religious place that is only for the gods. So you start seeing how it's fenced up all around us, so it's not even open for people. It's only a place that's so secluded. So they created a architecture designed for gods, which is an amazing, amazing, amazing concept. And here you see two of them, because every 20 years they start rebuilding using a lot of the same materials. So they know that they want to keep this, so they start using a lot of the materials. They start rebuilding it so that it will last forever. And it's an amazing tradition. There's videos that you can watch on that, on how they rebuild and how they really take it very seriously into doing this process. And you're seeing this Shinto shrine. This is images of how it looks right now. And this is phrase I highlighted because I want you to know what this the shrine buildings is the essence of Japanese architectures. Here the building traditions were preserved and ideas were germinated that will be explored elsewhere in later periods. The architecture probably evolved from vernacular designs. Design refines the building type to a high art form, creating a serene gable roof structure with elegant yet simple detailing. So what graded architects such as Frank Lloyd Wright, such as Mies van der Rohe, which is architects that if you study architecture, they are one of the big names of modern architecture. And they looked at these shrines in this era of architecture, and you start seeing this simplistic design, this very elegant, very modular, very clear and clean style of architecture that eventually found inspiration in the form that would inspire a lot of what we modern architecture nowadays. So here you start seeing a typical, what I believe is a typical plan of a typical house, yes. And here you're seeing earthen flat stores, but here what they've used is they use tatami mats, very modular. When I say modular, it means that it's modular. What it simply means is that it's a specific size, and you have to use it. You could make other sizes, but most likely you just kind of were limited or were constrained to using those sizes. So these tatami mats were created by rice and just kind of woven together. And they were 3 by 6 feet approximately, so about 3 by 6 feet. And they created this sort of, and so being placed like this, they started creating what the shapes of the room will look like. So they started just placing them around, and so it would create the shapes. Here you see the sort of tatami mat, and again, very clean, very elegant, very open, and Japanese architecture, again, combining the ideas of Taoism and Confucianism, the idea of connecting to nature. So this almost feel very transparent. It almost feels as, even if you're here, you feel like as wind is just flowing through the building and just circling around and not being trapped. A lot of homes that maybe you've been familiar with, it feels more protected, more secluded, a couple of windows here and there. But Japanese architecture is more about really connecting to nature, having these views. And then it's just in different architectures. I won't talk too much about the castle, but there is a part of our Japanese architecture that you need to understand, which is the idea of that they need, I'm focusing a bit too much on the simplistic, clean look, modernist idea of Japanese architecture, but there was also this side of that they did need to have protection. So they design according to that. It's very, 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 very tall, that survived earthquakes and everything, and it's been it really did its job well of being standing as something that was, they said it was like a bird that was about to fly away, but it was also very strong. Many called it like a white crane, which is one of those birds. So it's important just to know this building. Now let's finish with the Zen Buddhist architecture and this building. I want to talk about Katsura. Katsura is definitely my favorite place to visit. I've got an opportunity. I was going to show some images, but I don't think that I have. I couldn't find them. I would have to look a little bit, but there's some images of me studying architecture in Japan. I did a competition there. I was able to represent my university in this competition in Japan. And throughout the time, I did the competition, and then I did some traveling. I was there for a couple of months. And Katsura is one of those places that has inspired great architects, and I really felt like I needed to experience it myself. And it's this guided tour. So I just want to explain a little bit of how it looks. But it's in order to go through this building, or it's a sort of a series of tea houses. It's this garden. You have to go through this path, and whenever you go through this path, a lot of people, in order to get a permit to be able to get in, it takes months. It takes them, very, very long time. We were able to get access through one of our, the university. Not sure exactly who do they contact, but they were able to get us access while we were there. But it was an amazing opportunity. And I did have a slide, a PowerPoint slide that let me see if I can share that PowerPoint really quickly so that we can see that one. Let me see. Should be here. Yeah, and then so I'm gonna stop this one. Let's share the application. And let's share this. Okay, so let's start sharing this. So here you're just seeing some slide that I did, and I'll just jump over that. This is sort of a map of the, you get to this visitor center, and you are guided through this journey of Katsura, and you're guided through this journey. The different tea houses. The name of the tea houses, they some mean viewing the moon and different summer. So they all are basically based upon where placement, what they are able to view, what they're able to, what season they're going to be sitting there. And this was Katsura. It was created. It was done by one of the emperors, and it was a very, very private place. No one could enter, and even nowadays, it's really protected by the government. It's really hard to get in, as I mentioned. And in order to get in, you're guided to this journey, going through all the different ones, and you cannot go from, you cannot go from 1 to 3, like skipping this, sort of going through this. You have to go on this guided journey of going through the way that they want you to go. So go here eventually, you follow the path, and there's someone when I went, there was someone behind me, just sort of making us go, all of us at the same pace at the same time. So and they didn't allow anyone to wander off and anything. It was a very, very, very protected area. And this is sort of some images as you enter. All of it is created by this bamboo gate entrance. And one of the things that I enjoyed the most was that there was this sort of tree and this sort of views that you can see from a specific point. In this image, I was going to walk this way, but before I walked that way, we could see this tree. Eventually, you get to cross through it or close to it, but in the moment your eyes are wanting to go there because, wow, it looks very pretty, it looks very interesting. But again, it's a guided process. It's a guided way, and it's created that way because, again, going back to the idea of Confucianism and Taoism, connecting to nature and this hierarchy and controlling the idea of the experience. Some sort of nature that's there. This is what some of the tea houses that are there. You get to really sit there, and this number 6, it shows you the numbers. And this is really nice bridges connecting all. This is one of the most famous one, the Chaparral. There's some other pictures. I really like these pictures where in black and white, and here, they're very, 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 very zoomed in, but they're created to this is what is called architectural photography. So architectural photography is not just taking a picture of the building, trying to portray something of the building itself. So the building is talking about modernism, or talking about transparency, or some of those key concepts, whatever the part key is of the building. Architectural photography tries to show that as well. So here, really zoomed in so that it can show that it's a modernist, simplistic ideas. Here you see like these walls. You start seeing how these colors and everything looks so clean, so modular, yet so organic. And then these doors, they can move, and so it's very transparent, it's very open. These can't move, but it feels like it's sort of movable. And these walls are very transparent in this material. These walls, everything just guiding your eyes and the light. And so again, it's very zoomed in, but I just want to use it so that you can see the minimalistic approach that you can find this. And one of the great architects called Walter Gropius, if you want to study about him, but he basically came to this in 1954, and he fell in love with it. He just really, really fell in love with this, did a bunch of writings, and he basically was the one that introduced, his architect is the one that introduced the world to Katsura, and other great architects started coming, such as King Tange, Atai Sasaki, which is a great architect. Bruno Tai, he eventually said, eventually came to be held up as the perfect modern work of functionalism. Kenzo Tange he saw it as epitomizing the Japanese architecture tradition. At Daisosaki, he said, I have viewed it rather as this great mixture as deeply ambiguous, and its evolution is rather from accents and certain opacity of decided. And so one of the reasons why this is modern, a lot of modern architectures were influenced is because the idea of form follows function, very minimal, so removing a lot of unnecessary details. The idea that is very true to materials, you know, very exposed. You can see the wood, you can feel the wood. You're not really trying to cover it with plaster and stucco or something. The visual emphasis on horizontal and very clean lines. Again, look at all these pictures and how clean, how beautiful. You know, these are they're a bit photoshopped, they're a bit black and white, but still most of it is true to who they are. And look at how the minimalist idea of modern. And this is on the left. There's a modern building, and on the right, you know, Katsura. And you can see a lot of the common ideas, you know, the columns, the line, transparency, very clean modular lines. And I kind of go through all the different sizes, different pavilions, but I don't want to take too much time on that. But yeah, basically, that's the idea of Katsura, and like I said, I was one of those places that I really enjoyed a lot, exploring that. So in conclusion, this idea of hierarchical social government system, where the government was really leading a lot of the early construction, such as the Great Wall, such as the Forbidden City, such as these things, is a great representation of what really Chinese architecture was. The Confucian principles of hierarchy you can see in the city planning, you can see in the geometry of the houses, you can see in this sort of axis, the north-south axis that is being led by guiding. So everything is leading to the emperor, everything's leading to the highest place. In a house, it leads to the grandfather. In a city, it leads to the emperor. In a temple, it leads to where the shrine is, where, you know, the most religious part is. So we learned also the four-part composition, which is the platforms, the columns, the bracket sets, and finally the roof. We started learning, we went to Japanese architecture, and we started seeing that there is a lot of similarities, such as basically a lot, because they do follow also the Buddhist. So they have their own version of the pagodas, but at the end, the Shinto Shrine is the epitome of what Japanese architecture really is, and creating buildings that have been literally unreachable for people, and it's only for the gods. In the Japanese, we start seeing this repetitive axial grids, and in the Japanese, modular based on so both of using this modular sort of idea. And then, and finally, Katsura, where it's this epitome as well of modernist ways modern, but it's one of the oldest ways, but it's representation of modular, linear, plain, and at the same time, it's very following the ideas of Taoism to connect it to nature, based on Feng Shui, based on Zen, and on enlightenment. So that's sort of the class. Now I'm going to go really quickly through some review of questions that will show up on the midterm. So if you go over these questions, you'll be fine for the midterm. These questions are only pertaining to this chapter. They're only pertaining to this chapter, but you know, the midterm will cover the previous chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this one included N5. So this is not the only midterm review. We'll probably do others regarding the other chapters. So it's a quick midterm review right now. Like I mentioned, only Japanese and in Chinese. So let's see if you know it or don't know it. Pagodas. So who are octagonal, who are not octagonal? Oh, I needed to click on it. So the Chinese, octagonal, Japanese, square. So if any question comes along those lines, remember to know that. What is this building? Answer yourself. And it's the Hall of Supreme Harmony in the Forbidding Sitting. What were the Great Wall? What materials did they use? So originally it was ram dirt, as we talked about. But eventually, it did, as the wall was raised, they used and stone. What is this? Pagoda. So again, trying to help you understand what is this? Again, Great Wall of China. Feng Shui. Feng Shui, we talked about how different ways that it can be incorporated, but if you know this definition, you should be fine. Chinese art of adjusting the building to the individual site and its microclimate. What is this building? I didn't go too much over it, but it's the only representation that we have in the book, so it's pretty easy to remember. Japanese castle. Multi-story building with layered roofs next to temple hall and Buddhist temple. So I already asked a question about this because it's, again, you need to understand this, this concept pretty clearly. So thank you. That was the class. I will only give you one more thing. So there's I'm going to give you an extra credit opportunity because you watched the video till the end. The extra credit opportunity is that I was actually in Japan a while back, like as I mentioned earlier. But I wanted to really show the video. I mean, there was a picture. So I came out in Japanese news. And I'll show you the story really, really quickly. So I was in Japan. This huge typhoon came, and the typhoon eventually led that all the trains would close. So we were stuck in a train station for hours. And so the news people came to the station just recording everyone that got stuck. And for some reason, the news person did the whole interview with me in the background, with me and some friends who were stuck there. And I remember the camera was just pointing at us, and I knew that we were there already. We couldn't move, and so I remember just acting, like I was not really looking at the camera. But inside, I was pretty excited because I was coming out on TV, and some friends that they lived in Japan, they're Japanese, they saw the news and they took pictures. They were in Japan and they took some pictures and they sent me a message, hey, you're on TV. And I'm like, what? I was like, oh yeah, but I didn't know someone would actually watch it of my friends. So I have this funny picture of me just pretending not to be happy that I'm famous, and with all these like Japanese language characters on the bottom that I don't know what it says. And I always, just always remember that moment in a very funny, interesting time. So I'm gonna give you for hearing this story and spending time with hearing this story, I'm gonna give you just 2 opportunities of extra credit during the test, and one of them is it's going to be something around why did I come out in the news, and why did I come out in the news, and so the answer would be stuck in a train, the typhoon, and the other question would be what is one of the places that I really enjoyed visiting the most in Japan, and it's going to be Katsura, because as you saw. I really went a lot. I talked about it too much because I was really excited about that. So thank you for hearing this class. Thank you for listening to the lecture. Hopefully it was interesting to you, and keep on going to the next lecture so you can get ready for the midterm. Thank you and have a good day.